I woke up stretching in bed, feeling someone hugged me from behind. Confused at first, I soon remembered where I was and smiled. I felt his body against mine and his arm around me, stroking me. We hugged until the alarm went off. My lover got up and went to the next room to get ready for work. We always booked adjoining rooms to avoid suspicion about our affair. I am Dan's reference. We worked together for over 2 years and are mostly lovers. Our jobs require us to work closely and travel frequently, giving us plenty of opportunities to be together without suspicion. Yes, I'm married, and my husband works from home. My marriage is a disaster. I dated my first boyfriend, Alan, in high school. One night while my parents were away, I got pregnant. By the time we told our parents, it was too late to do anything but have the baby. My parents were furious and forced me to have a termination. His parents wanted us to keep the child and offered to take care of him until we finished school. Alan stayed with me throughout my pregnancy, defending me from bullies, and he was even temporarily suspended from classes. The birth was difficult, but he stayed with me the entire time. Our beautiful baby girl arrived 2 days after my 16th birthday. When we held Lauren, we knew we couldn't give her up. At first, my parents disowned me, so we moved in with Alan's parents. They helped raise Lauren while we finished high school. After graduation, we got jobs, married simply, and moved into a tiny house. Our university plans were postponed again when we had another daughter, Emma. Over the next decade, we worked hard and raised our children with the support of our parents. We both worked part-time, combining jobs and studies, managing to raise 2 wonderful daughters. Alan adored his girls, and they were very close. My relationship with them was more strained, with frequent arguments. Sometimes I resented them, subconsciously blaming them for derailing my plans since I was 15. After graduating, I became an assistant to Dan Johnson, the director of business development for a medical device company. I was 29 and he was 38. We quickly became a strong professional team, and I loved my job. Sales were rising and management was pleased. I finally felt like I had a normal life. My job required frequent overnight travel, often with Dan, traveling around the country, meeting clients, negotiating deals, and interacting with senior executives was exciting. I had a fantastic experience and loved it. I was traveling about 3 weeks out of every 4, sometimes for 1 or 2 nights a week, and occasionally on weekends. While I enjoyed the work and travel, it meant being away from my husband and daughters. Alan had to take on most of the parenting duties. Dan and I spent a lot of time together and got to know each other well despite our age difference. He had married around the same time as me and had 3 young children. To keep Alan from worrying, I told him I mostly traveled alone or with another woman and that my boss was a bit of an idiot. In reality, I admired Dan and loved spending time with him. When we traveled, we often found cozy restaurants to dine in, enjoying wine and long conversations. About 6 months into my job, after landing a big sales order, we celebrated with a special dinner and expensive French champagne. As we sat there, feeling happy and a bit tipsy, Dan placed his hand on mine and said, "You know, Amy, I'm falling in love with you." My heart raced, and I was speechless. After a brief pause, he stood up and extended his hand to me. I hesitated, then took it, and he led me to his hotel room. In the morning, we made tender love. I felt unbelievable pleasantly. Our flight home was in the morning, so we ordered breakfast to our room and lay undressed in bed. After eating, we made love again before leaving. On the way home, I felt guilty for cheating. I rationalized that having never had the chance to be with other men when I was younger, I deserved this experience. I also thought it might teach my husband a lesson for neglecting me, as our bed life had suffered from the early years of our marriage. I realized I was so preoccupied with Dan that I forgot to call Emma on her 11th birthday. Dan smiled and squeezed my hand on the plane, and despite the guilt, I knew I was hooked. When I got home, the guilt returned. Alan was happy to see me, but I avoided his affection. That night, when he wanted to make love, I refused, saying I was tired. I was genuinely tired and sore from my time with Dan. This was the first time I turned down Alan. Our affair, which began 18 months ago, didn't stop. Over time, I managed the guilt and hid my secret from Alan, becoming emotionally distant from him and my girls. My thoughts were always on Dan and when we could be together again. Lying became second nature, and the guilt faded. I fell hopelessly in love with Dan, and sometimes considered leaving Alan for him. We joked about it after lovemaking, but we both knew it would be a big step with serious consequences, especially for our children. Our company was expanding, so business trips became more frequent. When there were no scheduled trips, we arranged mock business trips, staying overnight at a nearby hotel. We also took short weekend trips to celebrate anniversaries and birthdays, using conferences at distant seaside resorts as excuses. We always had an alibi. At work, we acted professionally, never meeting secretly, having lunch together, or arriving and leaving at the same time. We communicated through secret email accounts outside the company's IT system. We never met in our city and only interacted in large groups at the office, avoiding one-on-one conversations. I called home at the end of the day, choosing a time to avoid interruptions. I never told Alan where I was staying, and he never asked. At home, I complained about my demanding boss and frequent travel. Alan often suggested I find another job with less travel. I told him the pay was too good to leave. At work events where partners were present, we managed our interactions carefully. I introduced my husband to my boss, and he introduced his wife. We kept conversations short and polite, then mingled with other colleagues, never drawing attention. Alan was happy with my successful career, but frustrated by my frequent absences and increased parenting responsibilities alongside his IT consulting job. Although I loved my husband, I noticed we were growing apart. He was always busy with the girls and work. I realized we rarely had lovemaking, and our love was fading. I made a mental note to try and make it up to him.
We had a tough start to life, having our first child at 16, getting married at 18, and then having another child. Despite these challenges, we worked hard as a team and both graduated from university, me with a degree in IT and Emmy with a degree in commerce. We raised our two girls with love and didn't complain about the hardships. When Amy landed her first professional job 2 years ago, she was thrilled, and I was very proud of her. We both grew in our careers, earned good salaries, and were ready to live a normal life together. Initially, I supported her career growth, but I began to resent her long hours and frequent travel. She left home at 7 a.m. and usually returned around 6 or 7 p.m. She often had overnight business trips, sometimes not coming home until Saturday evening. When she was home, she either worked or watched TV. Saturdays were spent sleeping in and shopping, while Sundays I went to the gym and had breakfast with friends. She was usually too tired to go out with me, and we rarely spent time together as a family. The girls and I often took vacations without her. I noticed changes in her personality. The loving wife and mother became distant, selfish, and irritable. Our bed life suffered, and I grew frustrated. Whenever I tried to discuss it, she dismissed my concerns, saying it was my imagination, or that she was simply tired from work. I worried about where this would lead. At the end of her first year, I had to attend a staff Christmas party at the CEO's mansion with her. I met her boss, Dan, and his wife for the first time. Our conversation was polite but brief before they moved on to chat with others. My wife then introduced me to the rest of the staff. I found it odd because Dan seemed friendly and reserved, not the ogre Amy described. Dan's wife was nice too. Given Amy was his assistant, I expected more than just a polite exchange. Amy seemed tense, speaking quickly as she does when nervous, which I found strange considering their close work relationship. Although I trusted her, it left me uneasy. The following year, I was busy starting my own IT consulting company while raising our girls with little help. I set aside most of my worries about Amy. However, her behavior remained the same. Frequent travel and increasing distance from us. She became condescending and dismissive towards me, showing little love or affection. Our bed life dwindled to occasional pity encounters. It was clear our relationship was falling apart without love or closeness. At the end of the year, I attended her Christmas party again, and our interaction with her boss was the same as before. Suddenly, I had a fleeting thought that she might be hiding something. For the first time since we started living together at 15, I had doubts about her. Could there be another man in her life? The idea was almost unbearable. We had worked so hard together through many challenges to get where we are today. She wouldn't do that, would she? I didn't take extreme measures like hiring a private investigator or hacking her computer, but I began watching her more closely. I found nothing incriminating, so it was either my imagination or she was good at hiding her tracks. Regardless, our relationship was not good, but I was too busy to care. Meanwhile, my girls were growing up fast. 15-year-old Lauren was becoming a beautiful young woman, and 12-year-old Emma was on the cusp of womanhood. We spent a lot of time together, and we were very close, though their mother had little time for them. Both girls were avid soccer players. Every Saturday morning during the season, I watched them play, which was the highlight of my week. After the game, we'd go to their favorite Japanese restaurant and talk about their lives. I noticed they almost never mentioned their mother. Depending on the weather, we'd walk along the beach, watch a movie, or meet with friends. After the first match of the season, Emma introduced me to a new teammate. She was a charming, tall, beautiful girl with a wide smile, long dark hair, and deep brown eyes. She was very athletic and stood out by scoring 2 goals in her first game for Emma's team. "Dad, it's Callie. Can I go to her house this afternoon?" "Hi, Callie. Nice to meet you." "Sure, Emma, if Callie's parents agree." Callie turned and shouted, "Mom, can Emma come over this afternoon?" Callie's mom, who looked just like her but older and stunning, walked over and introduced herself as Sophie. She agreed to have Emma over, and we chatted briefly, though I was a bit tongue-tied. After they left, my girls laughed at my embarrassment. That evening, Emma told me Sophie was really nice. She had been a single mother since Callie's father died in a car accident 3 years ago, raising Callie and her 11-year-old brother Tom on her own. Sophie seemed like a great person to me. The next Saturday, as Lauren and I watched Emma play soccer, Sophie and her son joined us. I had mentally prepared myself not to look foolish again. We chatted during the game. She had recently moved to the city for a new job and didn't know many people. She was happy Callie had found a friend in Emma, and complimented me on Emma's manners. After the match, Emma asked if Callie could come over. "Of course, Emma. That would be great. If Sophie doesn't mind." "Not Callie, me. Why don't you all come over for lunch? Do you like sushi?" "Yes, I love it." "Great, it's settled. Why don't all 3 of you join us?" "Thank you for the invitation, Alan, but I don't want to intrude on your family time." I felt a bit disappointed until Lauren chimed in. "No, Sophie, please come. It would be nice to have someone to talk to. You won't be in the way at all. Please." Sophie looked at me. "If you're sure I won't be intruding, Alan, that would be great." I shook my head and muttered something incoherent as we walked to the cars. Lauren grinned at me. Dinner was a great success, with the 4 girls chatting for almost 2 hours. Tom seemed to enjoy talking with me about computers and football. At one point, Sophie casually asked my girls if their mom ever watched their soccer games. Lauren's answer surprised me. "No, never. She's not interested in us, only her work and herself. Dad is our mom too. He takes care of us." Sophie gave me a questioning look. For the rest of the season, we had lunch together after each game. Emma and Callie became close friends, visiting each other after games and sometimes after school. Tom often came over with Callie, but preferred hanging out with me. We tinkered with computers, kicked a ball, or rode bikes. I noticed Lauren frequently visited Sophie, and they would go shopping or chat over coffee. My girls never mentioned their mother to Sophie, and neither did I. Sophie and I became fast friends. As nearly single parents, it was easier to support each other in raising our children. After the football season, our kids often went on their own excursions or visited friends, usually without my wife, leaving me free. Sophie and I spent more time together, walking, having dinner, or watching movies. I looked forward to our meetings and realized I was falling in love with her. Despite this, we never crossed the line of friendship. One day, while having coffee with Sophie, I mentioned how much I appreciated her spending time with Lauren. "You know, she never stops talking about you. Sophie this, Sophie that," I laughed. "Tom's the same about you. Alan this, Alan that," she responded with a laugh. "He needs a man in his life, so I appreciate you spending time with him." Then she said, "Forgive me, Alan, but it seems clear that things aren't well between you and your wife." We had never discussed Amy. Avoiding the topic, I stayed silent for about half a minute. I had been avoiding this issue for a long time. "The truth is, Sophie, if it weren't for the girls, I would have left ages ago. Things were good a few years ago, but not anymore. I've tried talking to her many times, but I hit a wall. Our marriage was difficult from the start. I think Lauren told you about Amy and me getting married young." "Yes, and she slightly blames herself for your situation. I tell her it's not her fault at all." That opened the floodgates. I spent the next hour unloading all my troubles on Sophie. At the end, she came over and hugged me tightly, my first real hug from a woman in ages. "I'm always here, Alan. If you need me, know that." I just hugged her tighter and didn't let go. Another year ended, and it was time for Amy's annual Christmas party again. My meeting with her boss was similar to the previous ones, but this time I was on high alert. Amy and her boss seemed much more casual, which made me suspicious. Later in the evening, Amy excused herself to go to the restroom. A minute later, I noticed her boss casually heading upstairs, so I followed. I didn't find Amy in the restroom and started searching the house. As I approached a bedroom door and opened it slightly, I heard my wife's voice inside. "Merry Christmas, my dear." A male voice responded, "Merry Christmas, my love." Peering inside, I saw Amy and her boss in a long, passionate kiss. Shocked, I quickly retreated and went downstairs, furious and unsure of what to do. Instead of confronting her immediately, I calmed down and decided to investigate and plan my next steps. Amy returned shortly after, slightly flushed, and pretended to be my loving wife for the rest of the evening. I acted as if nothing had happened. Before the new year, while Amy was sleeping, I hacked into her phone and laptop. Amy should have known better than to keep evidence on a personal computer, especially with a husband who knows how to hack. My worst fears were confirmed. I found a wealth of evidence across her work, personal, and secret email accounts, showing she had been in a long-term, passionate relationship with her boss for over 2 years. Photos and videos revealed the depth of her betrayal. Their emails even discussed leaving their spouses to be together, although her lover was more cautious. Feeling like a fool, I installed surveillance software on her devices to monitor her every move. My marriage was clearly over. My priority now was to maintain custody of my daughters and protect my business and finances. On New Year's Day, I consulted a divorce lawyer. She advised that the divorce would be no fault, so we couldn't sue for infidelity. However, for child custody, once children turn 14, they can choose which parent to live with. She also devised a strategy to protect my company from the divorce proceedings. Emma would turn 14 in 6 months, giving me time to get everything organized. I needed to keep this a secret from Amy. I confided in Sophie, who burst into tears. She revealed that her husband had been liquidated while driving with his secretary, and she discovered their affair after his pass away, making the loss even worse. After she composed herself, we talked more, and I told her about my plans to leave Amy. She just smiled. To set my plans in motion, I convinced my wife that since we were both earning well, we should sell our small house and rent a bigger place. We could use the cash from the sale as a deposit for a new home. She readily agreed. Our house sold quickly and we rented another nearby. I was listed as a tenant under a 6-month lease. Sharing a bed with Amy became unbearable, so when we moved, I caught a cold and used it as an excuse to move into a separate room. I never returned, and she didn't mention it. I also told my father everything and had him start a new IT company, making him the owner with me as the only employee. I closed my old company and operated through his. Everything was on track until I encountered a nervous and scared Lauren. She was dating her first boyfriend, and I feared she might be pregnant, just like her mom had been. "Dad, it's hard to tell you, but Mom is having an affair with her boss." I was shocked she knew and was speechless for a moment. "Why do you think so?" "Right after we moved, Emma and I went back to our old house and saw Mom and her boss there. That's strange, but it doesn't prove anything. They had lovemaking, Dad, on the living room floor." Recovering from the shock, I said, "I've known about the affair for some time." "Then why don't you do something about it? Emma saw it too." I called Emma, who was hiding nearby, and she shyly walked into the room. I hugged them both tightly. "Can you both keep a big secret?" They nodded. "I'm going to divorce your mother soon. I'm waiting until Emma turns 14 so she can legally choose who she wants to live with." "With you," they shouted in unison. "It won't be easy to keep this secret, but we must make sure your mother doesn't find out." They smiled conspiratorially. I then asked Sophie to talk to Lauren about her first boyfriend, hoping to guide her away from her mother's mistakes. Since Amy was rarely home, we could manage her occasional presence and keep our secret. We enjoyed the time even more when she was gone, knowing the end was near. We spent more time with Sophie and her kids, often having lunch at each other's houses or going out together. One Friday afternoon, when my wife was supposedly at a conference but actually with her boss at a festival, Lauren said, "Dad, I'll be Sophie's babysitter tonight." "Oh, really? What's Sophie doing?" "She's having lunch with a guy at Brasier Paris, that cool French restaurant in the city." I immediately felt jealous and tried to hide it. My daughter gave me a pitying look. "She's going with you, Dad. It's time for both of you to go on a real date. I've already made the reservation, so call her now and invite her properly." She handed me my phone. "What if she doesn't want to go on a date with me? We're just friends. I don't want to make it awkward." "How did you even graduate from university? Call her now?" I called Sophie, and she accepted the offer immediately, almost as if she expected it. It took me 3 tries that night before my girls approved of my outfit. As I was about to leave, Callie and Tom arrived. Seeing my puzzled look, Lauren said, "Oh, I forgot to tell you they're spending the night, so don't worry about coming home late, or at all if you don't want to." She smiled and handed me an overnight bag. Clearly the kids were in on the plan. When I arrived, Sophie met me at the door in a stunning little black cocktail dress and heels. She looked incredible. "Well, say something, Alan." "I can't. I'm speechless." "Do you like it?" she asked, spinning around. "Oh, much more than like Sophie." We had a fantastic dinner and enjoyed each other's company. At the end of the evening at her front door, I said, "I know our kids made me stay the night, but you don't have to feel obligated." She put her finger to my lips and said, "Shh, I'm counting on you to stay." She led me inside to her bedroom. At first, we were a little shy and unsure, but it didn't take long for us to get comfortable. Seeing her undressed was breathtaking. By the end, I was completely exhausted. The next morning, we made sweet love again and then lay in bed for a long time, enjoying the afterglow and the feeling of our bodies intertwined. It felt so right for both of us. We heard footsteps, voices, and a knock on the bedroom door. Lauren poked her head inside. "Good morning, you two. It's almost 10, and we're tired of waiting. Breakfast will be ready in 20 minutes. I would ask if you had a pleasant evening, but your expressions say it all." She grinned, and there was laughter as they left. "Our kids are wonderful, Sophie." The breakfast they made was delicious, and it was great to eat together. Later, I tried to explain to my girls what happened between Sophie and me. Technically, I had cheated on their mother. They rolled their eyes and laughed. "Dad, it's time for you to be happy again. You're not really married to Mom. She left you years ago." "So you're all in on this?" "Yes. Emma and I need a mother, and Callie and Tom need a father. You and Sophie are meant for each other, so everyone wins. Even if I thought it was a good idea, Sophie might not—" "Dad, it's obvious how she feels about you. Do I need to say more?" "No, nothing more." Their reactions showed they found it amusing. I felt they were in control. A few days later, over dinner, I announced I was going house hunting that weekend. Sophie asked what kind of house I was looking for. I want it close to the beach, 2 stories, a big family room, a kid's escape room, a big backyard, and a pool. It needs at least 6 bedrooms in case the family grows. And I want to make sure the woman I like also likes it. Looking at her, I added, "I want to know if she likes it too." Sophie stared at me for a minute, then kissed me passionately in front of the kids. They watched, then burst into joy, dancing around us. I took that as a yes. After weeks of searching, we finally found the perfect house and decided to buy it together, using Sophie's husband's money and my proceeds from the sale of my house as collateral. Everything was set for the face-to-face meeting with Amy. As Emma's 14th birthday and X-Day approached, Amy announced she was going to a sales conference on the West Coast for 7 days. Later, I checked her email and discovered she was actually going on vacation with her boss, celebrating their 3rd anniversary in Bali, Indonesia. To avoid suspicion at work, they each told everyone they were spending the holidays with their families, claiming they had been neglected due to hard work. Amy left work a day before her boss and flew to Bali alone. He followed her a day later. She planned to return to work a day earlier than her boss. To make this scenario believable, they became careless. Their scheme wasn't up to their usual standards, and it could easily fall apart if anyone checked. Amy flew out to her conference, and we immediately began packing and moving our things to our new home, where Sophie and her children had moved in a month earlier. Well, the Balinese god of vengeance, if there is one, smiled at me. The same evening Amy arrived in Bali, the local active volcano, Mount Agung, erupted, spewing volcanic ash into the air. All flights to and from Bali were suspended. Her lover was still at home, and Amy was stuck in Bali alone to celebrate their anniversary. I couldn't have imagined a better outcome and laughed so hard I almost peed myself. The volcano continued to erupt, and flights remained grounded, keeping the lovers apart. I checked her emails and messages daily for fun. The lovers were unlucky, and Amy grew very angry with Dan, as if it was his fault. Sometimes Amy called home, claiming to be busy at the conference, blah blah blah, acting differently than usual. I asked her about the hotel and the city she was supposedly in. Later, when I logged into her laptop remotely, I saw that she was frantically searching the internet for plausible answers whenever I asked her anything over the phone. Meanwhile, the 6 of us settled well into our new home. I asked my lawyer to file a legal separation request with the family court. I also obtained temporary custody of my girls after submitting their signed requests to live with me. As Amy's return day approached, all flights were still canceled, and I wondered how she would handle the situation. She called one evening to say she had made many contacts at the conference, and her boss asked her to follow up with them immediately before returning home. I could tell she was very nervous. It's also good she didn't do video calls because I wouldn't have been able to keep a straight face. I reassured Amy that we were fine and that I understood everything. Another week passed and she was still stuck in Bali. I saw desperate emails and correspondence between the lovers. Her boss told everyone at work that she needed to extend her leave for family reasons. He also called me and apologized for keeping Amy away from home for so long, claiming it was a big opportunity, vital to the company. Blah, blah, blah. I had anticipated his call and was ready to respond like an obedient husband to an important working wife. I assured him that everything was fine and I understood. Then I innocently asked where Amy would be going. He hastily came up with a few places, and I read his letter to Amy instructing her where she supposedly should be. My strategy was to make her worry and plant seeds of doubt that she had been found out. Whenever my wife called, I continued to reassure her, but kept asking about attractions in the cities she was supposedly visiting. I always asked a few unexpected tricky questions and enjoyed her attempts to answer. I was just playing the role of a clueless husband. During one call, I said, "Hey, Amy, have you heard about those poor souls stuck in Bali because of the volcano?" There was an awkward silence. "Oh yes, but I didn't pay much attention to it on the news. One of my colleagues was stuck there for 2 weeks. Do you remember Paul Howard and his wife? We met them about 6 months ago." "Oh yes, we're working on a project together, and he has to do his part online from his hotel in Nusa Dua." "Well, at least the Grand Hyatt isn't a bad place to be stuck." I heard Amy gasp on the line. It was the same hotel she was staying at? Paul wasn't even in Bali, but she didn't know that. Immediately after the call, she moved to a cheap hotel on the other side of the island. She must have been praying to get away with it. Of course, my 5 girls and son thought the whole farce was funny. Yes, Sophie's children were mine now. Finally, after almost 3 weeks, the volcano stopped erupting, and flights to Bali resumed. Amy called to say the job was finished, and she would be back Friday afternoon. I was waiting for her arrival at the airport in our now empty rented house. I planned this meeting very carefully. When she came in, I was sitting at the kitchen table with 2 glasses and a bottle of wine. She looked tired and very nervous. Unfortunately, she had a deep tan, which is unusual for someone on a business trip for 3 weeks. I no longer cared about her usual casual kiss on the cheek. "Wow, you got a nice tan on your business trip? Did you actually do any work?" She muttered something, blushing. "Sit down and have a glass of wine with me." I poured wine into my glass and took a sip.
"Alan, I'm tired. I just want to go upstairs, shower, and relax before dinner." "Sorry, but we have something to discuss and it can't wait. So sit down right now, please. The girls will stay the night with a friend so they won't disturb us." Amy's face showed real fear. She thought her game was finally over and I was going to take strict measures. But she didn't know what yet. She reluctantly sat down and I poured her a glass. I had rehearsed this speech many times and made an apologetic face. "You know things haven't been good between us for some time now, Amy. Don't you know why this is so?" She looked scared and just croaked, "No." "I'm sorry to tell you this, Amy, but I can't sugarcoat it. The truth is that I met another woman. I love her and want to be with her. That's why I decided to leave you and be with her." In an instant, her frightened expression turned to silent rage. I continued to look apologetic. "I didn't want this to happen. I just think you're so far away all the time, and I've gotten lonely." "How dare you do this to me, Alan? After everything I've done for you, who is she? I assume you're sleeping with her, blah, blah, blah." I just sat there with a sad face while she attacked me for about 5 minutes. "I see that you are very angry, and that's understandable. There's no point in continuing to talk now. I'll be back tomorrow around noon to talk again. We have a lot to discuss." Having said this, I returned to my new home. Lines of angry text messages and voicemails followed me. I didn't bother to answer. Everyone at home was worried about how it had gone. My answer, even better than expected. We had pizza for dinner and watched a movie together. The girls turned off their phones to avoid contact with their mother, although I made it clear to them that they couldn't completely sever contact with her. Why didn't I confront her about her affair? Because it will hurt her much more this way. That night, Sophie and I made tender love. All my worries and stress just melted away. Who is Amy? The next day, I arrived at my old house with a folder of papers. Amy, still very upset, greeted me along with her best friend Claire, a lawyer I never liked.
I'd seen old emails where Claire encouraged Amy to continue her affair when Amy felt guilty and considered ending it. I sat down at the table facing them both. Apparently, Claire had been appointed as Amy's representative and decided that attacking was the best defense. She ranted about what an idiot I was, how wonderful Amy was as a wife and mother, and how I took advantage of her hard work for the family. She insisted I had to beg Amy to take me back, or she would ruin me in the divorce and take the girls away so I'd never see them again. What hypocrites. Clearly, after last night, they expected me to mention her affair with her boss. I maintained a sad, apologetic, mocking expression. Amy, I know this must hurt you, but I'm a little surprised you're so angry. It's been a long time since I felt like you really loved me. For the past 3 years, you've been physically and emotionally absent from our marriage. This is complete nonsense, Alan. Of course, I was in it. I know I work a lot, which often takes me away, but I did it for us. Well, tell me, Amy, when was the last time we made love? Amy didn't answer. I can say it was 3 years ago. That's not true at all. We have lovemaking. Yes, occasionally we had lovemaking, but I'm talking about making love. In fact, I can name the day when it all started. Remember 3 years ago when you were on a business trip and forgot to call Emma on her 11th birthday? She tried calling you several times and couldn't reach you. She was so upset. I remember this well because Emma's birthday was also 2 weeks ago when you were gone and you forgot to call her again. I thought it was a bad anniversary for us. She looked at me guiltily. Ever since you returned from that trip 3 years ago, we've had nothing in common. I always wondered why. I could see from their faces that I'd hit the mark. They looked very awkward and glanced at each other. After all, Amy, we've slept in separate bedrooms for about 6 months and it didn't seem to bother you. I can't remember the last time we went out or relaxed together. It's like taking a vacation from work. They both flinched. When you're home, you're actually not with me or your girls. I smiled inwardly as they squirmed in their seats. Anyway, Amy, I'm sorry, but I'm moving on and I hope we can make our divorce as simple as possible for the girls' sake. There's no possibility for reconciliation. Who is she? Do I know her? You've met her daughter, Callie. She's Emma's best friend. We met her mom, Sophie, at a Saturday football match last year and became friends. Our friendship grew into love. We had a relationship and recently decided to move in together. Before they could say anything else, I placed a large numbered folder on the table. I've gathered some documents and information for you. Tab A is the legal separation agreement I filed with the court 2 weeks ago. Tab B is the divorce petition you need to sign. The sooner you sign, the sooner we can move on. Tab C is the proposed financial settlement. Tab D is the new lease for this house. The lease expires in 3 weeks, so if you want, you can renew it in your name. Tab E contains all utility contracts. I submitted my notice to terminate them in 3 weeks. If you want to stay, you'll have to renew them in your name. Tab F is a bank statement. I took 60% of the funds from our joint accounts. Credit cards are in your name, and you're now responsible for them. Finally, Tab G is a temporary court order for custody and child support. The girls decided to move in with me, so I got custody. Child support will be deducted directly from your salary. Visitation will be arranged later to our mutual satisfaction. They were stunned. Claire got excited. Fool, you've been planning this forever. You won't get away with this. We'll take your IT company, your girls, and your money. Well, yes, I've actually been planning this since Christmas. I had an inspiring moment at your staff's Christmas party, Amy. I realized it was truly over between us, and it was time to act. I saw Amy desperately trying to remember what happened there. So selling the house to buy another was a sham, Claire said. I just smiled. Well, Claire, I don't have a company you can take away. I closed it a few months ago. Now I'm working for someone else. I bought a new house with Sophie after filing for legal separation. It's not an asset of our marriage. Since I have legal custody of the girls, I use 60% of the cash from the sale of the house to buy a new one. So I'm not sure you can really do this, Claire. By the way, if you check state law, you'll see that when children turn 14, they can choose who they want to live with. They chose me. You really are a prick, Alan. I bet you're the one who turned the girls against Amy. I wouldn't do that. I'm not that cruel. In any case, even if I thought about it, there was no need. Amy did it herself by neglecting them for the past 3 years. Amy, you'll have to work hard to win them back. It's important for their well-being to have a good relationship with their mother. She didn't neglect them. She's a good mother. That's not how they see it, Claire. She was practically absent from their lives for many years. Amy, ask yourself, who feeds them? Who takes them to sports? Who packs their school lunches? Who helps them with homework? Who buys their clothes? Who always remembers their birthdays and buys them gifts? Who goes out with them to the movies? Who do they turn to with problems? Who helped them in the first months? And who gives them love and affection? I could go on. Amy was very quiet. I could tell she was struggling to make sense of what had happened. The girls asked me to ask you if you'd meet them for breakfast tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock at a cafe by the beach. In fact, it was my idea for you to meet since they don't really want to see you. So what should I tell them? Everything is okay, she just nodded. I left them and returned to my family. The next day, the girls reported that Amy scolded me the whole time and demanded they live with her. Eventually, the girls excused themselves to go to the restroom and quietly left. What I can't understand is why she wanted to make peace. She didn't care about me for years. Maybe I was just a convenient teacher and housekeeper for her.
When Alan told me he was leaving me for another woman, it was a complete shock. How could he? I thought he loved me. Despite several attempts to talk to him about reconciliation, he wanted nothing to do with me, and the only contact we had was during the pickup and drop-off of my daughters. During visits, my girls were openly hostile towards me, making our time together unpleasant. When I dropped them off after a visit, they happily ran to their new stepmother and hugged her deliberately to upset me. In the end, I told them not to come until they wanted to. I always assumed that my life would continue as usual, with my lover for pleasure and my husband caring for me at home. The shock and emotional devastation of Alan essentially abandoning me was enormous. As the months passed, I realized it was a huge surprise, but shouldn't have been. Alan was right. I had been an absentee wife in many ways. Over the past 3 years, I focused most of my love, emotional closeness, and lovemaking on Dan. There was little left for Alan. The only real surprise was that he stayed with me for so long. I couldn't afford house rent and child support simultaneously, so I had to move into a tiny old apartment. I spent my nights at home alone, watching TV and eating junk takeout. When Alan left me, Dan's attitude also changed. He suddenly became too busy with his family to spend much time with me. Even though I was now a free woman and always available, he increasingly sent me on business trips alone, saying I could now handle clients on my own. When we were together, the emotional connection seemed to disappear. We'd just get together and have lovemaking, and it wasn't great anymore. About 6 months after the end of my marriage, Dan announced he was leaving the company for a job in another city. Tearfully, I told him never to contact me again. In the blink of an eye, I became a divorced woman. I couldn't help but think of the line from Joni Mitchell's song, "Why is it always like this? You don't appreciate what you have until you lose it." I stupidly thought I could have it all. It didn't help my confidence that Alan was now with a wonderful woman who was so good, it was impossible to hate her. He is simply happy with his new partner. I remember how he looked at me when we were young, parents struggling to raise 2 children. No matter what difficulties we faced, we fought together to overcome them and were happy and in love. How did I let this fall apart? Both my girls looked much happier too. They saw Sophie as their mother rather than me. I was just an annoying relic from their past they were forced to visit occasionally. It really hurt. I think I hit rock bottom when I started crying to the girls about my situation. Lauren looked at me coldly. "Well, you were the one who threw Dad aside. I know I wasn't a perfect wife and I neglected you all a little, but he was the one who left me for another woman." "Mom, he left you because you had an affair with your boss. For 3 years. The look of horror on my face said it all. I was so ashamed. Alan knew about it all along, but said nothing. My life was disgusting. I really screwed up, left a good husband, and lost my daughters. True to his word, Alan encouraged our girls to stay in touch with me. He was right that it took a lot of work to get them back. Gradually, they began to come without coercion, and sometimes even spent the night. One evening, as I dropped the girls off at their new home, I asked Alan if we could talk for a while. He got out of the car with me. I turned and stood in front of him. "Lauren told me you knew about Dan and me. I'm so sorry, Alan. You were a good husband and you did nothing to deserve this from me. I was just an ungrateful, selfish person and I got what I deserved." He just nodded. "Why didn't you tell me that you knew everything, Alan?" Maybe you could have stopped me early enough to save our marriage. By the time I found out, it was too late for that. When did you find out? I caught you with your boss while you were secretly meeting at the office Christmas party last year. I didn't let you see me. Then I dug around and found out everything. I blushed deeply, feeling ashamed. I have to admit, I was very surprised when you got stuck in Bali alone. Oh God, I feel so miserable. You must hate me. Why didn't you confront me? I was very angry with you and wanted you to feel my pain. I did some research and found out you weren't the first secretary your boss slept with. He has quite a history. So I decided the best way to punish you was to stay silent and let events unfold. Knowing his past, I figured if your affair remained secret, he'd eventually get tired of you and move on to someone new. I was afraid that if I caused a scandal, his wife might find out and divorce him. Then he might stay with you, and you wouldn't face the consequences. Plus, if you thought I left you for another woman, it would hurt more. Your strategy worked perfectly. You certainly got your revenge. Well, Alan, my life has turned to crap. Looking back, I'm sorry you got hurt so much. Well, a little sorry, to be honest. You don't have to apologize. I would have left you if you had done what I did. Looking back, I was seduced by the excitement and became dependent. In the early days, I tried to stop, but it was too late. I got so wrapped up in him and my desires that I forgot about you and the girls. My anger is gone, Amy, and I truly forgive you. I approach life more philosophically now. After all, I wouldn't be with Sophie if you hadn't cheated on me. Yes, I understand. And that's partly what hurts the most. Our marriage was difficult from the start, Amy. I don't think you're a bad person. You made a big mistake, but he was a professional seducer. You never had the chance to grow up properly, to enjoy the normal things teenagers do, like dating and figuring out who you really want to be with. Your boss took advantage of that. You're probably right, Alan. But why did you tell the girls about him? It was too cruel. No wonder they hated me. I didn't tell them, Amy. They told me, what? How? They came home unexpectedly and found you two in the living room, remember? Right after we moved our things out? At first, I couldn't remember. Then with horror, the image came back to me. What? They saw everything? Yes, even Emma. Lauren gave me a pretty graphic description of the event. I felt like my whole body crumbled, and I began to sob deeply, ignoring everything around me. I don't know how long I cried, but I realized Alan had his arms around me, supporting me and holding me tightly with my head buried in his chest. The familiar feeling and smell made me burst into tears again. I felt like I was lifted, carried inside, and laid on the sofa. I felt so terrible. Everyone, including Alan's new partner Sophie, was so sweet and caring. She insisted that I stay to calm down. Then when I came to my senses, she insisted I stay for dinner. Sitting at the table with his new family, Alan looked so happy. I really screwed up. Later that evening, as I was walking out to the car, he put both hands on my shoulders. Amy, I don't want you to keep punishing yourself and being miserable. We had a rough start when we were too young to be parents and commit our whole lives to each other. When you think about it, the amazing thing is that our marriage lasted 14 years. That's our common achievement. Look on the bright side. Our two mistakes produced two wonderful daughters, whom we raised into beautiful young women. That's a fantastic legacy of our marriage that can never be taken away. You're right, Alan. Speaking of mistakes, I must say that I made one more. Sophie is pregnant. That's why we're getting married sooner than expected. You seem prone to making mistakes. You're a good man and a good husband, Alan. Better than I deserved. I wish you all the best. I hugged him, kissed him on the cheek, and left. My life is really busy. My only hope is to find someone else as good as him. A slim chance.
Why did I forgive her so easily? Because hatred can consume you and make you cynical. Because she still regularly received punishment just by seeing me with Sophie. I loved her once too, and our connection still existed despite everything. Although I wanted to punish Amy, my real revenge was directed at her boss, Dan, who seduced and took her away from me in the first place. I hacked into his computer too, sending him an email that looked similar to the one from Amy. It included a hidden Trojan that gave me full access to everything. I discovered that he had quietly and cleverly embezzled money from his old employer and was now playing the same game with his new one. I collected a lot of evidence and sent it anonymously to both employers and the police. Faced with overwhelming evidence, he pleaded guilty at trial and was sentenced to 7 years in prison. His wife was with him throughout the trial and then visited him in prison with their children. I met with her and showed her incriminating evidence of his numerous affairs. She was furious and immediately decided to leave him. To get revenge, I went to visit Dan in prison. At first, he didn't recognize me. "Hi, Dan, we actually met before. I'm Amy's ex-husband." "What the hell do you want, fool?" "To give you messages. First, from my ex-wife, Amy. She sends her best wishes and hopes you enjoy your new home here, which I personally helped arrange for you. You know, you should use the services of a professional to encrypt your computer. Once I hacked it, it only took me 15 minutes to uncover everything. I just couldn't resist sending this material to the police." After he stopped swearing at me, I added, "I hope you don't mind that I also visited your wife and showed her all the compromising photographs and videos I found of you and your friends. She's very, very angry with you. She insisted that we take revenge on you in your bed, and I couldn't refuse her. I don't know why, but she missed you." "Nonsense." "She asked me to show you this," and I put in front of him photographs of both of us having lovemaking in different positions. Of course, they were faked using Photoshop, but he didn't know that. "She asked me to tell you that she will never visit you here again, and you will never see your children again. I gave her the name of my lawyer who is organizing a divorce from your sorry back." The look on his face was priceless. Yes, revenge is a dish best served cold.